Good evening, everyone. It's certainly a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to learn and contribute as best I can. I'm Gloria White Hammond. I'm a co-pastor of a largely African American church in Jamaica Plain, Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church, where I serve with my husband. I'm also a retired pediatrician who practiced at the South End Community Health Center for about 30 years. And now I also serve as a resident scholar at Harvard Divinity School, where I co-direct a program in medicine and spirituality. The biggest chunk of that is teaching a course called Spirituality, Medicine and Spirituality and Healing. And I teach Harvard Medical Divinity School of Public Health students. I'm very much interested in operating at this intersection of medicine, public health, and spirituality.
Gloria, would you mind also just giving us a, one-liner, two-liner about your definition of spirituality?
Sure. Well, I must admit, I think that the definition that you all gave in the guide is really spot on, and so I don't know that I can offer an improvement on that. It can be understood as our individual sense of what is a meaningful connectedness to self, to family, to community, to work, and there's something that we know of as the divine or a higher spiritual power.
Okay, thanks. All right, Michelle, would you go next? You're still on mute, Michelle. There you go.
Hi, it's lovely to be here with you all. I'm Michelle Torres. I'm a pediatric chaplain at Boston Children's Hospital, where I've been there for 13 years. And I'm bilingual in English and Spanish. I'm also an Episcopal priest. And my two boys, Mateo and Johnny, I consider two of my greatest teachers. Mateo was born with infantile spasms and meets criteria for Lennox-Gastaut syndrome and is medically complex. And Johnny is typical and was adopted and is half Dominican and half Puerto Rican. And we are a bilingual family. And it's a great pleasure to be here with you all tonight. My definitions, so I'll give you two brief ones. That my whole sense of vocation of feeling called to hospital chaplaincy came from Reverend Dr. Ernley Young. And he's a Methodist minister, and he created the hospital chaplaincy program at Stanford Medical Center. He defined spirituality as helping one love themselves, find meaning in their life, and hope in their future. And that was really like what inspired me. I was pre-med at the time. And another definition that's I've really internalized came from Reverend Mary Robinson, and the former director of chaplaincy spiritual care at Boston Children's. And she defined it as hope, strength, and courage. And so it's basically how we make meaning. But hope, strength, and courage is another way to say that.
Great, thank you. And Marilia, would you go next?
Good evening, I'm Marilia Rivera. I'm mom of two boys, Daniel, who is 7, and Diego, who passed on June 2018. He born with tetralogy of Fallot. That's a congenital heart disease. I'm a doctor of nursing practice with a specialty in neonatal and pediatrics. I'm currently teaching nursing and also publishing online resources on pediatric palliative care, death, dying, and bereavement. As I continue my grieving journey, and continue to honor my son's legacy, my passion to support other families, it's absolutely growing every day. And my definition on spirituality I think that spirituality helped us to understand and go through the process, not only the diagnosis, end of life, and also his death. So absolutely gave meaning to our feelings and experiences, and also supporting Daniel, my other son, Diego's brother. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. And Cara,
Hello, everyone. So my name is Kara Iyek, and I am mother to Evren Iyek, who has acid sphingomyelinase. He's a big boy of 20 now. I also have his younger brother, Errol, who's 18. And by profession, I'm a teacher. And I love the rare disease community, and I enjoy writing. That is how I found my best contributions. And one of our contributions has been a book my son and I have written called Extraordinary, a book for children with rare diseases. So my definition of spirituality, I believe that it's very personal to each person. So I can only speak for myself and say my definition for myself is a relationship with God, and all of that entails.
thank you very much for being here with us. And again, thank you to all of you who are participating tonight. We're excited to have you with us. One of the things that we try really hard to do at CPN is be very inclusive and invite all different, aspects of, different kinds of topics, and that includes spirituality. So we're going to look at some people who have very strong faith or participate in religious activities, and then those who maybe question or aren't sure, as one CPN mom said, I don't know what I believe anymore. And that was, of course, after her child was diagnosed with a serious illness. So we know that often, this topic as a separate thing is not sort of brought up a lot or talked about. And so hopefully we'll hear some ways to really help both ourselves as well as clinicians be able to talk and understand that we are both the physical and the spiritual put together, that we're really a whole being, and that we need to pay attention to both aspects of that. So again, thank you for being here. Jennifer Seidman is our other CPN person, and Blythe is not here, but Allison, one of our other staff, is here just to help with tech issues or watch the chat or speak up if I forget, something there. So in order to kind of get us all thinking and looking at this subject, we're going to show just one Courageous Parents Network video. We do have many. You can see much more of Michelle Torres speaking about families and experiences at Children's Hospital in Boston. Both she has some that are in English and Spanish on our website. We've also just developed a guide, and we have quite a few videos of families talking about their experiences, both their questioning or their ways they see themselves as perhaps not religious and more thinking about believing in positive thinking. So we really want to present that range. But anyway, first of all, we'll get going with the video if it's okay, Jennifer.
Sure, if I can make it
Okay.
work.
Okay, if we can make it work, fingers crossed.
It should be good. Don't look at my messy screen.
When I got Brooke's diagnosis, of course, I panicked, and I was saying, to my best friend of 17 years who's a Christian, I was saying, oh my gosh, is she going to go to heaven? And everyone said, well, yes, because she's, forgiven, and she's can't make the decision on her own. And I'm like religious ignorant. I'm not educated in religion. It's not like I'm an atheist. I just don't know enough about it to choose one way or the other. And so I was talking to my girlfriend, and she said, yes, Brooke will go to heaven. And so I'm like, well, but I'm not going to go to heaven. You're telling me I'm not going to go to heaven because I don't believe in God. And it was a huge struggle to the point where I really started integrating myself into the Christian community even more so, and really started to explore Christianity and wanted so badly to believe, and I just couldn't. And then after some time went by, I looked back and I said, that's just not who I am. I'm a honest, hardworking person, great mother. I don't lie, steal or cheat. I'm saying to myself, there's, if I were to believe in a God, I would want to believe in a God that would appreciate that, and let me be with Brooke again, someday. So I veered off the course of trying to, get myself to believe, because, I hadn't my whole life, and I wasn't going to force it on myself. So we're non-religious, but, I also have a son who I need him to have faith and hope, not so much maybe at that level, but specifically with his sister. And so Jake and I have agreed, that Brooke is going to go off into the universe. She's going to go off and not necessarily to heaven, because that's not necessarily what we believe, but Brooke is going to be out there in the universe, and we can talk to her whenever we want to, and she'll always be, around us.
I thought it would be great to hear from our two parent experts. Just maybe, Kara, do you want to go first? What's your sort of reaction to the video?
Oh, well, I really feel a little sad when I watch the video. And I think one of the reasons why I wanted to write the blog that I have here for CPN is I know that in the name of religion, so many parents have been hurt, and it's so sad. And this shouldn't be the way it is. So there's a difference between spirituality and religion. So spirituality is very personal, and that is defined by each individual. But religion is something that humankind has created, a group of beliefs and rules and systems that you have to subscribe to. And you're either included or kind of excluded from that group. And to have anyone say that a child is going to be separated for eternity from his mother based on his or her religion is very difficult to hear. And my heart really goes out to that mother. And I hope that she, on her journey, that it continues to evolve, and that she can come to a place where she can find genuine peace and comfort in the spirituality that she is able to develop on her own.
Okay. Maurilia, would you mind sharing your thoughts after watching the video?
Yeah, watching that video was confirming how important it is as a parent to receive support from other healthcare professional. That's important to accept, their spirituality, whatever it is, and make comfortable them through their journey. It's very important.
Mm. All right. I guess I'm going to let each of you sit with your thoughts, and we can certainly come back to the video. But I wanted to ask, perhaps Michelle first, what your experience has been with families, and how they cope, particularly with an adverse event, whether that's getting a diagnosis or seeing their child decline. How do you see families kind of rely on, whether it's their spirituality in the largest sense or definition, or their religion to get them through?
It's interesting in that I would say that quite frequently when families are religious, that they do find a deep sense of hope and strength. And I'm thinking of a mom that I first met this summer that has an infant with a very aggressive brain tumor that's malignant. And she had a response that I hadn't heard before that really that I just found deeply moving, that, you know, so oftentimes parents and kids question, why me? You know, particularly, I think that you know, there's a common belief that if I'm a good person, I do the right things, that life is going to turn out okay, and bad things aren't going to happen to good people, right? And this mom's response was, God, did you forget about me? Like, you know, like, how was this a mistake? Like, did you know, her child kind of fall through some kind of theological crack? And just kind of the shock in terms of that. And she, I actually was able to baptize this baby on the neurology floor. And it's been, you know, it's been an amazing journey. And that this little girl has had a really rough road. And the faith, and mom is religious, and second or third generation in her religious tradition. The father of this child is spiritual rather than religious. And in working with the two of them, I work really hard to acknowledge both of their belief systems. And even in the baptism, included prayers that spoke to dad's beliefs. And one of his primary beliefs is his mother, who has died, that she is watching over them, and, you know, and continues to have a presence in their life. So it's interesting that I do find that parents often they don't necessarily find answers, but I think in many cases gives a sense of peace, and that they're in God's hands. And also that, well, there are families that pray for a miracle, and that is very interesting as well, in terms of I've seen families that, when the miracle doesn't happen, can be completely devastated and have a significant spiritual crisis, and other families who were able to, in many ways, deepen in their faith and really embrace the sense of mystery in terms of how the divine, or how God is, however we name the sacred, is present in their life, and that have a belief that the ultimate healing will come in the next life. And that's, you know, one way that some families find some peace and hope and in the face of terrible suffering.
Thanks, Michelle. Gloria, I'm wondering about some of the families that you've walked with through their adversities or challenges, or hope for miracles. How has that been for you?
Well, and you're right. I pastor a largely African-American congregation in which the belief in miracles is actually fairly common. If you look at polls, there was the Pew Foundation did a study, a survey. It's been a while now, so it was in 2007, and just on the basis of their survey of several thousand people, like 79% of people in the U.S. believe in miracles. And it's interesting, even people who identify as what we call nuns, who are not religiously affiliated, something like 55% of them believe in miracles. So
Mhm.
the belief in miracles is actually very common. And so that is, and in my tradition, the belief in miracles is even stickier. I mean, it's the percentages are not necessarily greater, but it's very sticky to the extent to which people absolutely believe in miracles. So I'm not, people will often call, we're the first, after they leave the doctor's office, my husband or I are often the first people that they will call. And
Mm.
I'd say the biggest struggle is trying to make meaning of it. Like, what does this mean? And so much of my walk is sitting with people, trying to understand what this could mean, and relying on the resources that they've used in the past, if they've been helpful, relationships that have been helpful in the past. But I'd say the first thing is simply affirming the reality of what they're feeling, their sense of anger, normalizing that, their depression, their discouragement, normalizing that, and then being there to walk them through the various stages they typically will come to a place of acceptance.
Mm. Just have to ask, because both of you did mention those miracles, and I wonder, I think sometimes for clinicians or, you know, those of us who are hoping to surround people with our support and love can feel like, is that miracle, wildly out there, or how could we support them if we're really worried that maybe the miracle we think they're wanting, which often is, to have their child be cured and be healthy again. How is it best for us to try and respond to that? Do you believe in miracles, or will you pray for a miracle with me? Do you have any advice or sense of either how families might ask for that, or how clinicians, how we can come together in that? Gloria, do you want to answer first? Or Michelle, it doesn't matter. I'm just curious. Michelle, go ahead.
I have a family that I've been following this baby since he was born, and he is just turned a year, and was born with trisomy 18, among other complications. And this family believes in miracles, and has been praying for a miracle. And it's been a very kind of wonderful and complex and challenging, kind of process to nurture and accompany. And my role as the spiritual care provider and chaplain has been to really help the team, that they don't have to share the theology, but they need to be respectful. And sometimes, and I think that it's important for all of us to be authentic. And I think it's like, where can you meet this family? And I think, most caregivers can meet a family in their genuine, hope for the well-being of the child, right? And but also doing some coaching around what language is experienced as offensive, that if you're believing that this family they are Pentecostal Christians, and if they're explicitly believing in a miracle, in this kind of Christian worldview, that if they had a surgeon who said, we can do this procedure, and if not, we can let nature take its course. And that was extremely offensive to them.
Mhm.
And there have been, one of the things we found is, we talk a lot about continuity, and yet so oftentimes it falls through the cracks. And we found, like, it's gone to the point where any new team who talks with this family, we're requesting that someone who knows knows this family be present, because it's traumatizing for this family. And that the family interprets oftentimes what the doctors are saying as giving up on them. And there are cultural differences, there are linguistic differences, there are educational differences, there are economic differences, in addition to the religious difference. And what's been so beautiful is that this baby is alive and doing well because of his parents. That I feel like, and the nurses have absolutely fallen in love with him, and take such joy. And, like, the first time they were able to hold him, and the extra work that they've put in for the family to be able to do these things. And this child wasn't supposed to survive weeks, much less a year. So it's been just really, and that's one of the things I love, is that we can all learn from each other, even when we have different beliefs and experience.
For sure.
It's also one of the things that I coach my clinical colleagues around is accepting that people do believe in miracles. And I certainly, and whether I'm as my role as a clinician or a pastor, I certainly have seen situations that absolutely did seem like it was a miracle. As a clinician, I was a clinician before I was a minister. And to be honest, I'm very much grounded in the medical data. I'm much more inclined to think about best practices and survival rate. That's really my first point. And I've learned to believe that God shows up in miracles. I think the important thing is for the clinician, even as they respect an individual's belief in miracles, to acknowledge that they certainly do hope that there would be a miracle, but it's also grounded in the reality of the science. This is what I know. That based on my experience, based on my judgment, based on these sorts of things, I worry about a different outcome. And I think the important thing is for the clinician to stay in the conversation, to stay in the relationship, and to not make it one of those tug of wars where it's either my way or I don't care for you. That is a no-win situation. And I've seen that, and I can see how injurious it is. And it taps into so many other feelings that people have. But stay in it, honor someone's request for a miracle, and stay in the conversation, even as you're grounded in the reality.
Kara, I noticed you just put a comment in the chat. Do you want to just say that out loud for everybody? Or speak a little bit more to that?
I just said that small miracles, in reference to what Jennifer was saying, small miracles, I've seen them often across my lifetime, not big, huge, miraculous ones, but small ones. And that is part of the beautiful journey of spirituality. And it has been so wonderful. And I think having a child who's had such a complex and difficult growing up life, those small miracles have meant so much to me, and it kept me going. So they've been a really big part of my journey.
Yeah. Would you share one of those small miracles that you and Evan maybe have experienced together?
I wish I could come up with a wonderful example right off the top of my head. I'd have to put some thought into it before I could give you a good one. But maybe if you give me a
Okay.
minute or two, I can come up with a good one.
Okay. Okay. Marilia, how about for you? Where are miracles, or where have they been? Or
I think that I'm just remembering when Diego was really ill and at the end, I remember praying about a miracle just to have some time that Diego and Daniel can share, as brothers. And maybe it was something, that I wish as a mom, but it was very important not only for me, as for Daniel too. And they connect, they have a lot of time, together, and we celebrate that. And that's part of the beautiful of spirituality to help Daniel through his grieving journey, that he can remember all the moments that they had together. And for us, that was a miracle, being able to share, as a family. Short time for Daniel, but important. Short, but important time.
Mhm. And how beautiful that Daniel remembers those moments with Diego too, and that you can remember them and celebrate them together. Yeah. Yeah. All right. I think another part of sort of this connectedness that is being mentioned is how does that spirituality or faith or belief in something greater than ourselves help families as they struggle with making medical decisions, or with being in the hospital, or with how to relate. And so I wonder, maybe I'll ask our parents first, were there times, or have there been times when you feel as though you're anchored to that, those beliefs you have were helpful in kind of making some of those hard medical decisions that maybe you had to make while you were caring for your child? I don't know, Marilia, can you think of any decisions where you felt as though your faith really helped you kind of get through that?
I think that when we did Diego's tracheostomy, the trach, that was a very big step. And I remember that it was hard as a parent, and I'm a nurse. So I struggled a lot trying to make the best decision for Diego's quality of life, but also understanding about, what was Diego's life purpose, and if we were doing the best decision for him. And at that point, we stop and say, okay, let's pray to make this decision comfortable for him, not for what we want. So we pray to have a smooth process through the surgery. That was, the only thing that we had on mind at that time. And it happened, and it was a good decision for him. It was a hard one because we know that everything will change with a tracheostomy. But I think that was the hard one, the hardest one.
Thank you. Kara, how about for you? And for
So with
Everin?
raising Everin, I think when you have a child with a serious illness or a rare disease, the decision making is astronomical. There are so many decisions you have to make, and not all of them are big, huge life or death decisions. Some of them are quite small, type of medicine, whether to see this care provider or that care provider. The volume of decisions is so overwhelming, but I love that. I believe that God is with me. I believe that God gives me direction. And it takes the burden off of me to have to make all those decisions. It's not all about what Kara thinks and what Kara thinks is best, that I am divinely guided. And that the burden that takes from me is quite tremendous. So that has been really helpful. And the other thing that has been interesting for me about Everin in particular is he has an interesting form of ASMD. When you have ASMD, it depends on the severity. It's a spectrum disease. So if you have a real severe form, the children usually pass away very, very young, or they tend to be on the mild end of the spectrum. Well, everyone is kind of right in the middle. And one of the things about his life is so many of his organ systems have been affected by his disease. But how I see this in light of my spirituality is that God can take all of this suffering, he can take all of these really difficult and very painful things, and he can use them. He can use us to help encourage other people, which has been so amazing that with the book, Everin has been able to reach out to so many different rare disease groups, because it's like he has something in common with so many of them, because so many of his organ systems have been affected. And it was just a beautiful illustration for me how God can take the most painful of circumstances and really, really difficult things, and no, he doesn't take them away from us, but he can use them, and he can use them in a positive way that makes our lives more meaningful.
Another big decision for parents are the transition through palliative care. When you stop doing like aggressive treatment, and how you can, understand your feelings and your beliefs through spirituality, and switching that care for your child, that's a big one too.
For sure. I wonder, Gloria, if you've been with families who also have reached out to you to perhaps help them make some of those medical decisions, or figure out which way to go, or help them figure out, what strength or whom they can call on to help support them.
That happens a lot. Your pastor also happens to be a doctor, so it's not at all unusual. And in that role, I first want to know in what capacity they're coming to me. I have some families that really only want me to stay in the pastor lane, and they're not. They've got their providers, and they're going to do that, but they just want me to be their pastor. They want me to come to the hospital, to pray with them, to offer scripture, etc. And then again, others who want some guidance in terms of navigating the healthcare system. In general, what I try to do is really equip them to be their best advocates, helping them figure out what their options are. Sometimes I will go with them to actually talk with their clinician if that's their interest. And again, helping to guide them. Sometimes if they'd like another opinion, then I can help identify somebody who can help them think that through. And the main thing that I want to do is offer my best wisdom. And most parents want that. They want to do the best thing for their child. And then having made that decision, I'm there to support you 100%. So it is one of the greatest gifts I can imagine, supporting Cara or Maria. It is such an honor to be able to support a family as they're making some of those tough decisions and going through.
Yeah. Michelle, I'm wondering if when you are with families who are making tough decisions, if you find them, sort of questioning their faith, or perhaps they're not really sure where God is, or maybe that's not their connection to helping them make decisions. And is that, how do you counsel them, or how do you help them find the support they need?
I think that often, part of my assessment with families is exploring who do they get support from, and how, basically accompanying them as they are in the process of trying to make sense out of what's happening. And I think it's a lot of it is deep listening, and oftentimes reflecting back what I'm hearing from them in terms of, sometimes, like I can have parents who will say, I'll ask, what helps you refuel or recharge? None of us can run on empty. And sometimes, particularly really busy moms will say, gee, I've never thought about that, and so then I invite them, in terms of, well, let's take a couple minutes and think about, think about a time when you felt really nourished and replenished, and how did that come about? And because it can be so different for each person, that, and a lot of times parents will say their child is what inspires them, that they get a sense of, they have to, keep going and to be strong, because, children are so amazing in their courage and their will to live. And I also think about, I think about a family that I met this past year where this child has a refractory, like encephalopathic epilepsy, and in addition to a underlying metabolic disease. And these parents were told that the child likely wouldn't, survive more than a year. And he has, continued to live. And at one point, for this family, one of the most difficult decisions was getting a G-tube. And, a lot of families and parents and moms take really find deep meaning in being able to feed our children, right? And I actually just had a visit last week with a mom who, because of COVID, it was really amazing. Her child is now 1 year old. This child was born with hydrocephalus and also has had a stroke. And this is mom is bilingual and the father's Spanish speaking. And this poor mother, the parents were legally married, but often what happens in Latin American countries is they'll have this civil marriage and then it will be blessed in the church. And that's the big kind of celebration. And that had to be canceled because of COVID. And then when she was pregnant, she felt like something was wrong, but all the tests came back normal, but she canceled the baby shower because she had an intuition. And then when the child was born, she was correct. And the baptism was canceled because of COVID. And, all these losses, in addition to this really deep, profound loss around her child's health and well-being. And I was able to connect her to a Spanish-speaking Catholic priest who's going to be able to bless their marriage, baptize the baby, and offer some of these things. And she was like, oh, I wish I'd met you so much sooner. But going back to this other family that I mentioned with the encephalopathic epilepsy and the metabolic disorder, this mom said to me of like, how do I do this? Just even the G-tube. And as a chaplain, one of the things it's a blessing and a burden at times, in terms of that oftentimes people tell us things that they haven't told anybody else. And in this case, the parents shared with me that they were giving the seizure medicine in a syringe to their 2-year-old, who would then spit it out. And they didn't know how much he was getting. And so, of course, it wasn't surprising he kept bouncing back in a seizure crisis. And that's a situation where I will use some self-disclosure around my son, Mateo. And Mateo had a G tube. He now has a GJ tube. But, you know, being out for them to be able to, because oftentimes families don't have any context, right? They don't have any experience with any of these things. And so, and that can be a huge difference. And so when I was able to, you know, show them pictures and just answer questions, they agreed to the G tube, and that child hasn't come back in.
So you really were able to bring it together in a lot of different ways. I'm just aware of how fast the time goes when we're all together. And I guess I'd love to open up perhaps a question to anyone in the group, because we've talked a lot about people who do have a strong faith and an anchor. I'm also wondering if there are any of you that perhaps felt challenged or had a feeling like there was either family members or clinicians or someone who is sort of trying to impose their thinking on you or their spirituality or their faith on you. I know that sometimes it's not easy to talk about these things out loud, and it's also hard to feel like maybe we're being challenged in our belief systems. I don't know if there's anybody who's had that experience or is willing to share that, or has a different question too.
I would just say something that I spoke of earlier, which is people who say things that are very hurtful. I had someone tell me relatively soon after Evan was diagnosed, he said, "Your child is dying because he picked the wrong parents." And it was just, I haven't been able to let it go all these years, although I don't believe it. I didn't believe it then, and I don't believe it now. But this idea that people can say the most incredibly hurtful things, and I don't think enough parents understand what chaplains do, and we don't have enough access to chaplains because chaplains go through extensive training and they could be so incredibly helpful to all of us. But someone like me, I would probably have access to a chaplain only if my child were hospitalized. And I think at our children's hospital, it's just been such a great comfort the times I've had a chaplain been able to come and say, "Let me pray for you," or "Let's visit." It's just so incredibly helpful, but those opportunities outside of the hospital have been really rare. And I wish there were more opportunities to work with chaplains, because I believe they're very trustworthy. I mean, you can hear from our two chaplains today that they understand, the difference, and they work with people where they are and with their spirituality as it is. So hopefully people in the rare community will be able to have more access.
One of my other buckets of work is working with other spiritual caregivers around how to provide support for individuals and families who are living with serious illnesses. So, amen, Cara.
Yes, Lucio, hi. Please share your thoughts.
Thank you. I am calling from Los Angeles, California.
Thank you.
And I think, when it comes to in the healthcare environment, or anyone who is dealing with an illness, and parents, patients are struggling, trying to understand what is happening to them. I think it's very important to chaplains are professional, and they, I think, they receive extensive training, and they're expert in navigating this conversation. And it's very sad when like some institutions, or either because like they don't have the resources available to have a chaplain, or because it's just the lack of awareness that chaplains can really support patients and families during this difficult time.
Mm,
And here in LA, very often we don't get called in because maybe like the healthcare provider is not really aware of the e- of the need, or like the spiritual need, or like sometimes they don't have an awareness how much can uh, a person, a spiritual provider can help the patient or family navigate and walk through this difficult conversation.
mm,
There are many times parents go to family meetings where they are talking about the impact of the health for their babies. Chaplains are not invited. Like during end of life, chaplains are not invited. During difficult conversation, chaplains are not invited. And I think if like some of the institutions that has chaplains, it's important to take advantage of that. And in those institutions that don't have a chaplain, the resources available, uh, I think there are other communities outside that might be willing to commit sometimes and help out, because of the importance of spirituality. Is not just about religion, it's about a way of
right.
life. And how can we support that patient and that mom and that dad, or care
So we,
provider?
so we need to
That's great.
do a much better job of educating clinicians for sure, and also encouraging families to really speak up and ask. Laura, I see we have a few minutes, so please
Oh yeah,
share your
I'll be
thoughts.
quick. I was just gonna share that, I feel like chaplains can be a part of it very early on. And I know earlier the comment around like, oh, if you're not pursuing aggressive care, then you can have palliative care involved and they have access to chaplains. But our experience has been that we are doing everything we can for our son's condition and we have palliative care. So it doesn't have to be an either or. I think that's perhaps a place that like healthcare can improve what palliative care does, but I know I'm preaching to the choir here. Um, and just, we've had access to chaplain services through our community-based palliative care group. And it's been interesting. Our son's not like on death's door, and they kind of mentioned it in passing, like, oh, you probably won't want them. And I'm like, no, bring them by. Like, I'll take any help I can get. And I am not religious by, in my current iteration of me. That being said, I've found that my world of spirituality has expanded since having my son with this rare diagnosis. And I've found that one of the most important spaces where spirituality has come into play, and religion, I'm sure for many others, is like how to sit with uncertainty and how to just be there with it. And I think that's like a power of what a chaplain can do, is just be really present and not try to fix or push away. But and I have found that meditation and kind of more of a Buddhist thought process has been the way that I can access that right now. But that space within uncertainty is powerful space to be.
Mm, mm. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
And
Yeah.
just one last thing. I know we didn't talk so much about this, but I think it's also important to know some of my greatest inspiration has come in terms of spirituality has come from kids. And they, I'd say from the beginning, they just seem to have this thing that they're connected. And I think we drum it out of them, but they seem to have it coming in. So I think it's important to also provide spiritual care for kids and to understand that that's very much operative in their lives as well.
For sure. And I'll just share, I've shared it with some before, but Mary Robinson, who Michelle mentioned earlier, who used to be at Children's and help us all learn to, sort of be more aware as clinicians. But, she really taught me that spirituality and, may go with religion and it may come with a God or a divine, but also for kids, it might be the Red Sox if you're in Boston, or the Dodgers if you're in LA, or it might be the music, or it might be just whatever, whatever that child makes a soul connection with. And so we really want to be as inclusive as possible. And you're so right, Gloria. It's often the little ones that are, sort of reassuring, I think, parents often, and leading the way for all of us. Yeah.
And
All
just,
right.
I can jump in real quick. I had a visit on Friday with a 14-year-old who has relapsed brain cancer. She was waiting to go to the OR and deeply religious. And she has some she has some developmental delays. And as we were praying and talking, she was saying to her grandparents are the guardians, and she has a very special bond with her grandfather, and her eyes got big and she said, I see God. And I hear God. And she loves to dance. And she loves parties, and she was sad about not being able to go home and have a party. But she said that she wanted to thank God that she had doctors who she could dance with.
Well, I hope they were dancing in the OR then. Oh, well, thank you all so much for coming, being here, listening, contributing. You will get a follow-up email with our spirituality guide that's hot off the press. We're also going to create one for clinicians. And we look forward to having you view the videos that I said, are very inclusive, and joining us at future Courageous Parents Network events. If you haven't joined, we'd love to have you join. We only send emails out with sort of new things, so we won't bombard you, but we so appreciate our parent community, guardians, caregivers, and clinician community. So thank you for being here. All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you.